Just trying to look up the music. Hi everybody, Dan Hunter here. Looking forward to this session today. We've got on wellbeing. I've got with me here today one of my boys who's home today, Will, and Will is going to kick us off with an acknowledgement of country. Will, over to you.
I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of this land on which we meet. I am on Camaragal country. I pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging. Thank you.
Look up and give him a wave, mate.
Hi.
All right, thanks for that, mate. Come on, my headset back. Thanks, buddy. Maybe a sec. Get yourself organised. Joys of working from home. Okay, so really excited to be here today. We talk a lot about wellbeing at home. Obviously, we're broadcasting today right around Australia, so it's not just about New South Wales. We've got staff all over the country in various states of lockdown. It's difficult, but rather than me just talk about it all the time, and I'm certainly not an expert in the wellbeing and mental health space, we do have a couple of experts with us today from Grace Papers, the wonderful Prue Gilbert and Kate Gilson. Now, Grace Papers are a really nationally recognised organisation in the gender equality and wellbeing space. They've worked with a lot of large organisations, largely in Victoria and New South Wales, but right across Australia. They combine coaching, digital experiences. They empower employees and leaders to fulfil their best. And they've also obviously got that expertise, and they're doing a lot of these types of webinars at the moment around wellbeing. Prue Gilbert is the CEO and founder. She'll be joining us today and leading that conversation. She's a governance expert, a qualified lawyer, an executive coach, and is trained with the Empowerment Institute in New York. So she's got a very big understanding of social change, human rights, and good governance. She's been listed in the top 100 women of influence and is well respected and has quite a large media presence there. We're also joined by Kate Gilson today, who brings more than 25 years of experience in people leadership and organisational effectiveness and employee relations. She's also an executive coach and a yoga teacher. Prue, welcome. I'm going to hand across to you today as the expert to grab the reins and lead us through. Very excited to be here.
Thanks so much for the invitation to join you here today, Dan. We're really delighted to be here. And I too would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which I'm meeting or joining this conversation today, and pay my respects to their elders past and present. For me, that's the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, as I'm joining from Melbourne. And I'd like to extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here with us on the call today. I'd also like to introduce my colleague, Kate, who Dan has mentioned, and will be leading a lot of the insights that we're looking forward to sharing with you. As we get started though, can I suggest that you all just have a think about where your attention is focused right now and where you might focus it. That might mean turning any additional technology you might be plugged into to silent, notifications off, and in this really busy and challenging time for us all, consciously shifting your attention towards using the next hour to fill your bucket with tips, tools and strategies that should help you to not only survive, but perhaps even thrive during this time of uncertainty. And while you're taking a moment to set yourselves up, I want to share with you a quote from the founder of Thrive Global, Arianna Huffington. She says, "We need to have a mindset shift and stop believing the delusion that in order to be successful, you need to be always on and available 24/7, that you need to deprioritize yourself. Spend 60 seconds to 3 minutes each day on a micro step, a brief self-care activity that will help you be healthier, happier, more relaxed, and more mindful. then stick with it for 32 days, which will be easy because it's such a small commitment. Now, the good news is that for those of you who did just turn off your phone notifications, you've just taken a micro step. It was that easy. Okay, and we all know one of the other important distressors is actually breathing, which is available to us all. And while I did joke to our team this morning that, I might actually just give everybody who's joining us now a quick, 15 or 20 minute sleep, we're actually just going to take a few breaths instead. Knowing, though, that a 20-minute nap at 2 p.m. in lockdown, if that's where you are or working remotely, is something that might also be readily available to you. So take a moment to plant both feet on the floor, close your eyes, and take in a few deep breaths, reminding yourself that the choice to show up here today represents a choice to invest in yourself and your well-being, to accept the gift of time for contemplation during a period in which, for many, and especially those of you carrying the load of the juggle, this may have felt otherwise unattainable. So my goodness, Dan and Kate, what a time to be alive. New South Wales and Queensland are in stage 4 lockdowns, whilst other states are holding on to varying degrees of stages 1 to 3. Many of us are working from home if we can. Daily case numbers have become part of our daily conversation, and all of this has created a theme park of looping roller coaster emotions. And what we're still hearing from many people is, how can I continue to hold this all together and make it work? It's playing out in the media, in the statistics and numbers. And the New York Times has been reporting that this pandemic actually has the potential to wipe out a generation of working women. I've been listening to Michelle Obama's podcast. It's like my weekend soul rejuvenation practice. And in one of the recent ones, or one of my favourites, she actually talks about our relationship with ourselves. And I thought that might be a great place for us to start this conversation today, because it's certainly something that really resonated with me. My fears, vulnerabilities, where I draw courage from, and that loss that many of us are experiencing with this uncertainty. Now, this is your session for those of you who are joining us. So we're going to I'm going to pose these questions directly to Dan and Kate. I'm also going to ask that you think about what you'd like to share in terms of your responses with your fellow Business Australia village, assuming you're comfortable to do so. So let me kick off. Dan, how is your relationship with yourself?
How's my relationship with myself? Wow, that's deep. It's not too bad. I feel like I know myself pretty well. I'm going through a period of change at the moment because, and I think I'm slowly starting to grasp it. Last year, when we first went into lockdown here in New South Wales, I never worked from home. In fact, before this lockdown, I could count on one hand the days that I'd work from home. Because I was at New South Wales Health, we went in every day. It was crisis at the start of the pandemic, so I never did that. And I've always had this predisposition to I don't want to be around people, so I've never gravitated to work from home. It's just me personally. So I've had to make my peace with the fact that I'm sitting in front of a screen, I'm having these sorts of conversations, and I'm not surrounded by people in the workplace. So I'm getting there, but it has been something new for me to work out about myself, and has been my little challenge, I suppose, over this time.
What rituals of connection have you engaged with, I guess, since you've been in this new lockdown that have brought some joy?
I think the connections, there's obviously a lot of new sort of chat groups and text message groups and things like that that people share, those little anecdotes through the day that have popped up out of nowhere, some with colleagues, some with friends, some with family. My brother basically has a dedicated chat group where he takes screenshots of me when I'm in the media and draws terrible things all over my face and passes comment on how I might have gone in the latest media interview, which is wonderful of him to do. So, you know, but those sorts of things obviously are ways that we connect. And then I think, yeah, personally, I've taken on this this thing which I read online on. I mean, I've got sort of things that I do normally, which I make sure that I do to keep my well-being going. I'm trying to do things that are different to my daily routine or what I might do on the weekend and things like that. So, you know, what the challenge that was put out on social media, which I spoke to you about yesterday, Prue, was to embrace some sort of change or some, just even if it's minor, to do something a little bit different with your time during this lockdown period. So that's where I'm at.
Kate, you're in Melbourne and have had plenty of experience navigating, you know, lockdowns and the uncertainty that's come with this whole pandemic. So I thought I might ask you, what have you learned about your own well-being and what's in your toolbox?
Thanks, Prue. I'll just check that you can hear me okay first. Can you hear me? Yeah, great. So I'm not sure if it's a good achievement, or it's definitely not one that I expected in 2021 to be experienced in lockdowns. So just as a bit of background, I've got a 13-year-old and a 15-year-old at home. So I've been navigating the teenage emotions as well as lockdowns over the last couple of years, as well as a husband working from home downstairs too. So there's been lots of lessons in that, as you might imagine. I guess my main, one of my main ones is that wellbeing's not a set and forget. Like, we talk about wellbeing as a concept, like it's something that you achieve and then you've done it and you've got there, but it's actually not. And I think we all kind of know that, but we can sometimes forget that. You know, that there's a spectrum of wellbeing as well, and that you know, moods, including teenage moods, they affect well-being, and they change daily, they change sometimes hourly, and you know, that can be okay. I also learned that my well-being is really affected by, or how easy it is for well-being to be affected and influenced by some of those external viewpoints. So things like the news, things like, as we were talking earlier today about the numbers, like the numbers games and the numbers chats every morning, Twitter, social media, all of those things. I learned, you know, it's really easy to fall into that kind of external environment and not realise the effect that it's having on you at certain times. And so being conscious of that was an insight that I gained in terms of wellbeing, and learning when to turn them off and when not to read them. I also learned that my wellbeing is really, you know, positively impacted, and it's really practically impacted by some, you know, practical and doable, really little things, and you know, really simple things. And I think that's probably the change in, you know, having been through 5 lockdowns now, but just appreciating that, like things like being outside in the fresh air, having sunshine. Like, I remember in the winter last year, you and I talking about just need to go outside and get some sunshine on our faces and we'll feel different after we've done that. Movement is something that I don't take for granted anymore in my routine. Sleep as well. And one thing that I've learned about myself that I didn't know was the importance of having tidiness around me, which took me a couple of lockdowns to actually appreciate that impact on my mental health. I think what's happened over the lockdowns, though, from a family perspective, and as we've progressed through them, is that generally I feel like I have, but I also think that my kids too have become more resilient to uncertainty. So we had some, you know, I mean, fairly significant events like 13th birthdays and grade 6 graduations and things like that were hard at the time for kids to kind of get over missing. But I ultimately do think that they are changing and growing and becoming more resilient, you know, because of this whole experience as well. So the things are in my toolbox. very practical things like morning walks with a girlfriend, or any kind of exercise to start the day. Having a morning routine, particularly in the depths of our long lockdown last year, when it can feel like Groundhog Day, over and over. Having a morning routine I found really important. So getting up, doing something outside and in fresh air. We're lucky enough here to live kind of nearish to the beach. So I really started to appreciate that getting some physical perspective actually helped my mental perspective as well. And so if you can find somewhere where there's a little bit of height, or you can see a horizon or some distance, that can be really helpful and beneficial on gaining clarity and perspective in life. was one of my learnings. Breaking up the day in terms of walking around the block. So working from home and just breaking up that, back-to-back Zoom meetings, by, again, going out, getting some fresh air, but really building in diligently. And I think we'll talk a little bit about this later in terms of some, productivity hacks, but making sure you've got 10-minute breaks between meetings and going outside and just doing a walk around the block. It doesn't have to be long. And then I did have the typical creative things on the go. I did get into banana bread. I did get into sourdough. That actually kept me quite entertained for a while, because it took me a long time to crack it. So those creative outlets were good for me. And having a Netflix series, that was really good too. When the kids needed downtime or cuddles, I often joke about how the Gilmore Girls saved me from wine a lot of the time during the long lockdown. I'm grateful for the Gilmore Girls.
I think they're awesome insights, and I think the biggest one for me is really around wellbeing is non-negotiable through this period of uncertainty. We can think about it for a long time, but trying not to think about it and just prioritising it. For me, it's also been the mornings and making sure that I have that space in the morning to get up, do some exercise, and embrace it's my most productive time, and setting that alarm and just getting out of bed, whatever it takes, because if I overthink it, then I might just go back to sleeping in, and I can definitely notice the difference in my wellbeing and then the way that I respond to my family throughout the day. One of the things we've been getting asked a lot by managers too is how they can build belonging in remote working environments. And we do have the Slido open, everybody. So if you can, or if you would like to add questions or comments, we'd love to hear how you've been building in belonging into remote working environments as well. How can you deliberately and intentionally recreate those bump into moments, those water cooler moments, not just on a transactional level, but a deeper connection level. I know some of the questions, we just asked you, each of you, around relationship with yourself, and, what are you up against is another great way to provide psychological safety when finding out how people really are. But what else? Kate, have you got any thoughts, or Dan, on, what else people can do and what you're seeing working around building belonging in this remote environment?
I think sometimes it's again getting that routine and getting out and about. There's a lot you can do just walking the streets and bumping into your neighbours, and you get that physical presence thing. For me, I'm building those. I stay in those routines around exercise, like you all do. I'm probably running more than I used to. When I say running, picture Joe Biden when he sort of ran up onto the stage, or Bill Shorten during his last election campaign. It's nothing fancy, and my knees certainly aren't thanking me for that. But it's pretty critical for me to start the day. One of the things that I've done, which kind of gets me more of a connection with the past and the environment, I suppose, Prue, and it's that new thing that I've started doing. I had a grandmother in New Zealand who's long passed away now, a good farming stock, and she was famous for swimming in the ocean every single day of the year. She was from the far north of the North Island, and water temperatures are pretty cold. So I decided to to channel her. My mother's always said that I'm like my grandmother, which I take as a compliment. So I'm channeling her, and on just on the weekends, I've been going and throwing myself in the ocean quite briefly because it's pretty cold. I've only done it twice, but I've now sort of made a promise to myself that that's my new thing, and I'm going to once on the weekend I'm going to nick down and to the beach and just throw myself into the ocean in a COVID-safe kind of way. So yeah, that's one of the things that I'm doing. I kind of wish I was channeling, my grandfather who just used to sit on the couch and eat and drink rather than picking and swimming grandmother. But anyway, that's what I've done.
I'm sure it will stand you in better stead throughout this period, throwing yourself in the water. I was trying to remember the name that it's actually given in the Nordic countries, something Hoff, and it is. There's a science behind that actually shocks you into well-being and out of those negative feelings.
Yeah, you feel amazing after it, but it's not. Yeah, it's sometimes hard to do.
Kate, what else? What have we found?
Yeah, so Dan, I'll take my hat off to you because that's something that I've had on my list, my to-do list for the last 12 months, and I still haven't been brave enough to do it. So you're already ahead there. I was thinking more from a work perspective in terms of how to create those or recreate or replace some of those kind of casual contacts that you have in the workplace that some people can really feel like they're missing that social side or just kind of catching up what's going on at work. And I think, by this stage, people are pretty, they're pretty used to doing these kind of things. But I know that when we started doing things like virtual coffees and virtual walks, they felt really silly. But I found, back at the start, they were a great way of connecting and having, non-work conversations, like consciously creating space to connect on a social level with work colleagues. And I remember some of the best conversations that I had, with work colleagues in the locations that they were when I was walking around the streets, with my headphones on. But it doesn't really matter, what it is. My reflection is probably that it's, reaching out and showing your vulnerabilities to each other. It's an opportunity to connect on a different level with each other, that in terms of your team or your colleagues, and just showing that you've got that kind of genuine curiosity and starting that sharing is usually, the best first step to make. And there's some of those more kind of human leadership skills that have really helped to drive up engagement scores and connection at work during 2020 and 2021. And I remember with some of the things that we did, little things like even just sharing podcasts, books, TV shows, they all helped bring people together and help us learn more about each other. Funny YouTube videos, which probably we learned things that we were horrified about each other as well. But, just some of those funny things. But in terms of belonging, it's, and this is something to think about in terms of your own teams that you have with people. It's obviously less taxing to reach out virtually to people that you know and that you've got connections with and you feel close to. It's a lot easier to do that. And when people are feeling tired and, often withdrawn in lockdown, it can be easier and less energetic to connect with people who are easy to connect with. But one thing I would suggest is that you think about the people who you're not connecting with in your team as well. Or the people that you don't connect with regularly or naturally or easily. And that might be, someone in your team, it might be a colleague, but diarise those appointments with people or those catch-ups with people as well, because in terms of creating that sense of belonging, connection, and, retaining that sense in your team when everyone's working remotely, that can be a really important step to ensure that feeling of inclusion and everyone's feeling that same sense of belonging. I was also thinking... Oh, sorry, go Prue.
Oh, no, I was reflecting on one of the, it's fairly well-known practice, but one of the practices we've done with our team is a daily stand-up with gratitude. And we actually all start with our gratitude. And I remember when we first kicked it off in the very first lockdown at the start of last year, one of our team rang me and said, "Oh my God, this is so Pollyanna. Are you kidding me? Like, you know, are these for real?" And we've actually stuck with it and committed to it. We've onboarded new team members, and it's been amazing. And every single person has commented in our team about the impact that it has on lifting them throughout the day. And it's a really simple ritual. It's obviously grounded in science and evidence that proves that it does actually lift you. And people's gratitudes, you know, they can be the coffee. Mine this morning was for the Royal Children's Hospital, where I spent 6 hours with my daughter yesterday. It can be for each other. You know, it's an opportunity to call others out, but it is a really inclusive way, and it gives everybody an opportunity to contribute. So I'd have to say that that's been one of my favourite rituals to build belonging in this remote working environment. And we've met all of each other's children, animals, partners, and really being able to listen more deeply to where people are at in that flow, you know, from a working perspective.
Prue, I might just take on something that's coming up a little bit in Slido, and it's a question around. I'm still trying to do and operate in the same way working from home as I would in the office, and yeah, my manager might be setting those expectations. I mean, probably for me to comment on, and I think the way to tackle this one, it's not easy, and obviously, you know, for me to sit here and say it is easy would be wrong, because, you know, I'm the CEO and I can dictate my own diary. One of the best things I read was in an email that we put out yesterday with that wellbeing initiative, and I think Richard wrote it. And when we drafted that email, it resonated with me. It said something along the lines of, don't try and work the same way at home as you would in the office. You know, you need to give yourself more space and elongate your days or whatever. So, and I think the way to go about that is to have those conversations with your team, have those conversations with your manager, because, you know, there's people, you know, educating the kids at home, sitting in front of a screen all day doesn't work. You know, for me, I have good days and bad. I often plan to have a bit of white space in my diary. And then I get excited and book in all these things like this one now on short notice, and there's a couple of other things coming this afternoon now, and I'm in back-to-backs. But except that you're going to have some crazy days and then lighten the load on the next day maybe. But have a conversation with your manager about it and your leaders about that, about how you can work differently as a team now that you are working from home, because it is crazy to try and do work the same way as we are in the office. I don't know, Prue or Kate, if you've got any comments on that.
We most certainly do. I think there are probably two things that are playing into this. One is the way people are actually feeling. And, you know, recently Adam Grant actually described the feelings and the up and down roller coaster that we're going through as, he said, it's not burnout, you know, we still have energy. It isn't depression because we don't feel hopeless, but we are feeling blah through our days and busy in a different way. You know, the days, you don't know where it begins and where it ends some days by the time you factor in some homeschooling, some kids' supervision generally, and a totally different routine to what you are used to. So the days can get much longer. And with that, they can feel more joyless and a little aimless. And Adam Grant described it, you know, that it feels like we're kind of languishing. So I described that as, you know, one of the feelings that contributes to this as well. But the other part of it is we do have less time, many of us, when we're working in this way, when our houses are full. And so we need to actually look at some of the productivity hacks and also consider the way we have conversations with our teams and our leaders around what kind of flexibility is going to work for our clients, our team, but also including our leaders as part of the teams. I think, one of the things we've seen over the past year as well is the impact on leaders who have sought to enable flexibility for everybody else. And it's come at a personal cost to them individually as they kind of pick things up to actually carry it for and deliver on, whether it's a client commitment or whatever it looks like. So thinking holistically as a team. So I'll break that down a little bit and perhaps, Kate, talk to you about or ask you about what can people actually do to feel like they're flourishing instead of that blah feeling of languishing in the context of work?
Yeah, I hear it all. And we've experienced it all as well. Yeah. One of the things that I've seen work really well when people are feeling, Dan, when you were referring to before to not continuing to work in the same way, one of the things that we've worked with clients and, I honestly believe is a great thing to do at this point in time is to really look at your accountabilities and your deliverables and really get clear, have the conversation with your line manager, what is doable in the environment that you're in the way that you're feeling, and make sure that you've got that clarity in terms of accountabilities, deliverables with your team if you're a team leader as well. Take the opportunity now to do it and reset them. Some organisations have, cut them in terms of, just accepting that there is a productivity, impact with juggling, what everyone's juggling at the moment. But for the most part, just getting clarity on that and feeling like you're really clear in terms of what that looks like, that can help to start with. You can feel like you've got more control over it in just having that conversation. Part of that, though, and accepting and experiencing and thinking about all of the things that people are juggling, particularly when there's homeschooling, is what we love to call Marie Kondoing your role. Marie Kondoing, the queen of decluttering our houses and sparking joy from having a decluttered house. The same principle can be applied in thinking about your role at work and, starting by making this, a list of all of the things that you're doing in your day and then going through that list and, thinking about what's the clutter in there, what sparks joy for me. What's going to help me feel like I'm in that flow feeling at work where time, it doesn't matter. And I feel like I'm, achieving and I'm feeling like I'm delivering naturally. Looking at that list and really thinking about, what's the clutter? What can I drop? What can I delegate? What meetings do I really need to be in? Meetings are just a sucker of time at the, at this time, and they can feel really overwhelming during lockdowns. What meetings do we really need to have now in this new environment? Can we be doing meetings differently? Can we be doing, more one-on-ones? Can we be clearer in terms of the purpose of our meetings so that they can be shorter and more productive? Just thinking about some of those things can help you, improve your sense of satisfaction, but also that feeling of control over what you're doing and what you're spending your time on at work.
Yeah, my comment, I think just a quick comment on that. I think one of the practical ways is to shorten all meetings. I think all meetings in an online format should automatically be shortened by a quarter to a half. And you should challenge yourself to try and do that because it just, they just go, it's just too long and people switch off.
Yeah, we've also found it beneficial to even talk to the rest of the family around when the important meetings are that they can't knock on the doors for, and when they can interrupt. And there are different kinds of meetings that we all have throughout the day. I've got a little window that my kids have notoriously put Post-it notes up on to ask, what's going on. And at some stage I will share my daughter's tips. She's written 2 pages on how to survive lockdown when both of your parents work full time. There's a bit of a disclaimer that comes with it because it's full of technology hacks around how to break into Roblox and unlock all of the different password controls that we had in place. But being really clear with them around, when they can interrupt and when it's not appropriate to interrupt helps them to create some boundaries around that as well. There's a question in here too around how you can create that psychological safety and boundaries when the team resists or ignores various attempts to communicate or check in. It doesn't feel like a culture of psychological or emotional safety. Kate, what are your tips, from an employee's perspective to make that happen?
Let me just have a look at the question. Sorry, I haven't seen it in the Slido. So connecting psychologically within the team or with the leader?
Yeah, what about a team that resists or ignores various attempts to communicate or check? It's not a culture of psychological or emotional safety.
Yeah, and that's hard. I mean, it's hard to do. It's hard to do to work in that environment, to be part of a team in that environment, in a remote or hybrid space. I think the things that I've seen work are, again, going back, connecting from a position of vulnerability, and I think tackling the way that the team is feeling and talking about what kind of what you want the team to feel like in terms of working in. What are the opportunities to the practical little things that you could start to do to change the way that team is feeling. And it might be just picking one person out in the team who you're feeling closest with, and thinking about, suggesting a virtual coffee or a virtual walk. If it feels safe, broaching that conversation about how they're feeling in working in the team, and what they, would like to do differently. So maybe breaking it down into little contact points and trying to understand where people's heads are at and what's behind it. Because the other thing, within this whole pandemic, people's headspaces are, they're all over the place, and people can be quite different to who they've been in the past because of the way that they're coping, with the pandemic itself. And it might be time, homeschooling pressures, sometimes starting with trying to understand those and where people are at, and asking some of those questions that you started with at the start, Prue, can be a really great place to start in forming those connections.
I would completely.
I think it's about. Sorry. Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think practically as well that people need to get away from email, and this is a bugbear of mine more generally. But email is one communication tool. You need to pick up the phone. We need to talk. You have to come out with that inquisitive nature and that open questioning nature, but. We need to move away from keyboard warriors, long emails, as a way of actually doing work. If you're writing a long email to one person, I think you've got to challenge yourself as to why you don't pick up the phone or Skype or whatever it might be. There's a million different communication platforms now, which is another bugbear of mine, but anyway, that's to solve another day. So having conversations, there is no substitute for conversations. I know we can't do it in person, but actually having conversations and taking that first step to reach out to people is important.
think for that person who's wondering how they can start the conversation too from, a potentially a place of power differential, where you're in a hierarchical team, for example, it may well be asking your leader what they're up against, which is an invitation to build psychological safety within the teams. So, building on what Kate and Dan said, ask the question, pick up the phone, and be open, but don't always wait for a manager or a leader to be the one that starts the conversation or creates the psychological safe space. Think about how you can empower yourself to do that, and find out what's going on for them. Kate mentioned the productivity hack around Marie Kondoing. There are some other really healthy habits and time management hacks that I think, when combined with rituals, ensure that our days don't become as long as they can be. It's very easy to sit at your desk from early in the morning until what feels like late at night, as you have juggled a whole lot of different things in between. Kate, what are your other favourite productivity hacks?
So one of my favourite ones, and Dan mentioned it before, was just making sure you're not booking hour meetings. And so I love, just being disciplined around trying to shorten meetings where you can, but making sure that you're building 10 minutes in between. And so you've got that time to get up, move, stretch, take a drink, get your head into a different space. So a minimum of 10 minutes between meetings. The other thing that I've become really conscious of, and we've all got the opportunity to think about this when we're working from home, is what are our energy levels and what are our best times for us to be doing different kinds of work. And whether it's, social team-based work, whether it's reflective writing work, whether it's thinking work, each of us have got times in the day where we do better in those different activities. For me, I really get into that thinking flow later in the afternoon, and that might sound weird, and it probably is, but that's when I just naturally find myself doing that kind of work, and I can come up with some great ideas at that time of day. For other people, it's in the morning where that deep thinking work is, where they're most productive around it. But just being conscious of that and knowing your own energy levels over the course of the day, and knowing the time when you're optimum, schedule those activities into your diary on that basis. Set a timer, and so be disciplined around it, and turn off all distractions and make that a daily practice. It can be really impactful in terms of the productivity and the amount that you're getting out of that time. The other thing, I think, one of the things that we know, people are struggling with is boundaries at the end of the day, and when to switch off and how to switch off. And so creating those little log out rituals when you're, closing your laptop down and you're walking away from your laptop, can help. It can help that mental disconnection from work. But it's also thinking about, well, what is that space? How am I going to create that shift in my thinking at the end of the day that I used to have my commute or my walk or whatever it was between the office and home? How am I going to recreate that time for my brain to mentally kind of wind out of the day and then wind back into home time? So it might be going for a walk to clear that and to create that. I think it's known as the third space. It's not work, it's not home, but it's in between, and that can really help that transition in your mind from in and out of work, and can help you appear from a family perspective connected and committed, and not still thinking about what's going on at work because you haven't quite let go of it yet. But other things can be, writing down, reviewing your progress on the day. What was good? What was a challenge? What do you need to think about for tomorrow? And then what are your priorities for tomorrow? Like, what are the things that you need, that, your must-dos? Just making sure that you've got that discipline in terms of thinking about those, writing them, and so you can disconnect from those at the end of the day as well. And then one thing that I love a member of our team does is plays a song at the end of her, like when she's closed down her laptop, she puts a song on, and that lets her kids know that she's exiting work mode and she's re-entering into family time. Other people change their clothes. There's lots of little things that you can do, but that'd be some of the productivity hacks that I think, there's some science behind them, but I know that they've helped people who've put them into place.
I think the other thing to think about are the rituals of connection with your family and how your family can actually help hold you accountable. Certainly for many of us during those harder lockdowns, it's been, a trip to the park, for example, with the kids, and leaving the phone or turning it off and putting it in the car or putting it on silent so that you can actually stand there. And, for me, it's been kicking a football. My skills have actually improved significantly, my children would tell you. I've also, rather embarrassingly, don't look too hard, done a couple of TikToks with them. So finding joy in rituals that they can connect with as well. But have also been really great for my own well-being because they forced me to completely disconnect from work when, some days it is hard to tell whether I'm living at work or working from home. So thinking about and actually spending some time asking your family or your neighbour or somebody else who's close to you that you can reach out to, what are the rituals of connection that are most important to them in terms of their relationship with you, and thinking about how you can factor those into the day, carving out the time for those specifically, because that's where you can generate joy and also build memories with your children or your family or your neighbour or your friend, in relation to, the period that we're actually living through. And that will, inevitably lift your mood, give you a good opportunity to connect. Anything else that either of you have done, Dan or Kate, from a ritual of connection that you might share?
I kind of like to combine things a little bit. So I sometimes combine the outdoor activity with a call to either family or a colleague, or sometimes a work call. I think yesterday I swept the floor while I was on a call with Shafali, which I get a lot of joy out of actually. And getting out for a walk or something, and with my call list of people. So I find that's quite good. Often I do my best thinking outside. I think the end of the day thing is really important. I work here in the kitchen, as you can tell, and primarily that's because I like being close to the fridge and the coffee machine. But I don't do it during the week because basically I'm lazy. But I pack up my screens and my computer and everything on a Friday night, and I put it away in the laundry, and I make sure it goes away and it's just not sitting in that living space all the time, and endeavour to switch off as best that I can. So that's kind of what I do.
One of the things that we used to do with the older kids in lockdown, because what I found after a while, I should have probably picked up on it earlier, was that we'd all kind of disappear into our rooms at the start of the day for homeschooling or for work. And, there'd be days where sometimes we wouldn't actually kind of see each other until the end of the day. So one of the rituals that we put in place in the long lockdown was finding a meeting point, like working out when everyone's breaks were and making sure that we could, come together for, morning tea or lunch or, whatever it was. We deliberately would do that during the day. So we had that, time diarised into each day so that we could make sure that wasn't getting away from us as well. So that might be something that people can think about too.
I had one other question that often comes up in certainly in a lot of the webinars that we've run over the past year, but also in the coachings that we deliver, and that is how to get children off technology at the end of the day. And I can speak to that with lived challenge. if you like, because it can be a bit of a killer. And using the understanding of, of their emotions and where they're at, and acknowledging that, just because I had finished my day and I'd, walk into wherever they were hiding, engrossed in a game of Roblox or whatever else. And my initial expectation was, well, I'm done, so you guys need to get off tech. And there was an element of guilt that I knew they'd probably been indulging in this for several hours. I didn't have, and nor did my partner, any space to actually turn around and address it or challenge them to do something different. And it was met with, with confrontation, let's be honest. The strategy that we actually introduced was, I would ask them what they'd been building, what they'd been working on, and to, goodness help me, show me their Roblox house. I would end up having to look at, all the different features and go on a little tour. So that engaged them and acknowledged how they had actually been spending their time, and joined them in a space that had been important to them for several hours, but it only took me several minutes to actually engage with them, and then they were actually much happier to share it. We did have a series with our eldest, who may have engaged quite a lot in Fortnite, and we did have rules around where they could actually play that. It had to be on the big screen, and we had to be able to hear what was going on. So I would often walk down and joke to his mates, come on, who's going to take Fitzy out, so that we can end this game sooner. So thinking about, using that third space that Kate mentioned before to transition yourself into the next space where you can actually connect with your family members on where they've been for that period, has, been really beneficial for us, because they've been lost in their flow for a fairly long period of time. I'm just going to have a quick look through any other questions. Dan, did you see any that we haven't quite managed to get to that you wanted? Oh, here's a good one. Any tips?
One I wanted to go.
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, one I wanted to go with was how do you suggest that the approach to the possibility that this will go for months with a balance, but real optimism. Groundhog Day is starting to feel hard. So how do we balance that? I'll have a crack quickly. I've always been an eternal optimist, and I think I probably said to you all at one stage early on in this lockdown, again being ex-New South Wales Health, how confident I was that we would come out of that lockdown in 2 weeks, which proved to be wrong. I think we've got to look at the fact that the vaccination rates are going up, that people are getting engaged. There is talk already of restrictions starting to lift. So we've got to hear the positive things. And then probably another thing which I will mention, which is worth a look, is there's this video on YouTube around how people who used to be stuck in war camps, a very serious video, following the Vietnam War, used to balance their sense of optimism. And it's by Jim Collins, and I know Jim Collins is a bit cliche, but if you Google Jim Collins and the Stockdale paradox, the Jim Collins Stockdale paradox, there's like a 5-minute YouTube video. It's a really interesting one which resonated with me when someone sent it to me at the beginning of the pandemic again. So have a look at that, and I'll throw it back to Prue and Kate to have a crack at it too.
It's interesting you mentioned that, Dan. some of you might have read or heard of Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, which contained his groundbreaking observations on the power of psychology, and in particular his focus on that small critical moment that exists between receiving a stimulus and a response. And Frankl observed that it's in that moment that we do have power to choose our emotional response, and that it's actually focusing on the small moments, particularly when times are tough, that we can start to take back our choice and our power, and start to shape some of the outcomes in our lives. And, you know, whilst I'm not remotely, I guess, likening the times that we're living in through now to those that, you know, Frankl was observing, however, the point is that when the environmental factors at play around us are more challenging than what we are used to, remaining positive and hopeful can be more of a challenge too. And so we do need to rely on and implement quite diligently the strategies and tools, you know, the ones that we've actually talked about today, whether it be finding your hour of power to get through a lot of your work in peace, showing yourself some self-compassion by understanding the relationship with yourself and where you're actually at and acknowledging it. Building on those rituals of connection, you know, we can use all of those different things when we are experiencing what feels like a loss of control, to take back control of the things that we do have control over and feel far more empowered because we have choice. And it does actually take, you know, I guess, a fairly laser-like focus. And I'm conscious of time that we've only got a couple of minutes, so I'm going to take the rest of the time to actually do something that we've found really beneficial in all of the sessions we've run over the past year. And that's really in taking you all back into calm, and with a bit of a visualisation to send you through the rest of the week, focused on what really matters in a way that helps you build your own agency with a vision for how you want to feel, you know, during life in these uncertain times. It's a series of questions that really can replace, you know, how much longer will this last, that you get from your kids, from your peers, from every other person you talk to around this pandemic, and adapts our mindsets to the expectation that the end and return to normal may or may not be a few weeks, months, or whatever away. And these are questions too that you can do with your family, helping ensure you've reframed the uncertainty for all of you and engage them, you know, to share, if you're managing a mental load, the mental load. So take a final moment for yourself. Perhaps close your eyes and imagine it's a year, I may have said this last year, so perhaps 2 into the future, and you're looking back on where you are now. You find yourself happily sitting in a park, latte in hand, watching people, perhaps your own family, play around you. And as you exhale and allow a smile to break across your face, you begin to reflect on the period of lockdown and restrictions, the uncertainty, the grief, the joy, the fear, the anger, the connection, and the hope. And you spend some time recalling the way you and your family lived through the corona coaster, what you're proud of, who you were during this time, how you showed up, who you helped and supported, and what worked well. And so for you to now ponder, if you're a parent or a carer, what matters most when it comes to parenting and caring during this period? After Marie Kondoing your role, what sparks joy in your work? And what is it you need most to stay connected to that joy and find flow? What do you and your family want to remember? And how do you want them to feel through this period of uncertainty? Which values matter to your family, and how are they showing up right now? And finally, which gifts can you rely on effortlessly? If you've shown up today, I'm going to suggest one of them is self-compassion. So congratulations for taking some time to put your own oxygen mask on first. For, as they do say, this too will pass, and there's something kind of special to be living through a once-in-a-century history-making period. So I'd recommend reflecting on some of these questions, perhaps making a note of one or two, and we're happy to share them with the team so that we can distribute them, and you can then work through, the responses. Invite your family members to contribute, ask them to do drawings, and, then send it straight to the pool room or the most prominent room in your house to really serve as a reminder to each of you as to how this next period that we're all working through could feel, and to give you confidence and inspiration to live more truly aligned to that vision. That's it from me. I'll hand back to you, Dan, to close us out.
Thanks, Prue. Thank you so much. I think that was a really great session. Kate, thank you so much. Look, hopefully you've all got something out of today. I really do hope that this has helped you go about your lives and your work, and will help out your home and family environment as well. Stay safe, and I'll see you next time. Thanks very much, everybody. Bye now.